Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Paul Wright. I'm the director of the Center for Information Technology Research in the Interest of Society, which is where you're visiting today in this beautiful building. I wanted to welcome you to the annual event of BERC. I've been involved in this organization for a long time, and it's a great pleasure and a great honor, actually, to be associated with such an incredible number of people that are part of BERC. I wanted to share two personal experiences. The first is that we have in CITRIS a large project on desalination, but related to measurement of desalination. So when you have a chance to have a coffee break or a tea break, please enjoy going into our tech museum, which is directly opposite the coffee stand. And in the far corner are our floating devices, which are being used in the Delta right now, to measure desalination and measure salination levels, I should say, and other aspects of the water. And then we've set up a sensor network amongst those floaters that can communicate the information back to a central resource. We have similar projects that are measuring the purity of the water in the Sierras, and we have similar projects that are measuring the water aspects in the Santa Cruz Bay. So I do invite you to go into the Tech Museum, because that really does connect many of the things that you're interested in today to some of our own projects within CITRIS. The second thing, which is very personal and related to BERC, is that BERC is connected, as you know, to this wonderful course that Beverly Alexander teaches, the C2M course. And one of my own personal graduate students, Christine Ho, working together with some MBA students, formed a company which has just started out of that class. So I know the power of BERC. I know the connections that the BERC students make with many of the venture capitalists that are in the room. I know from my own personal experience, this is not just talk. The rubber does really meet the road and things really happen. And so it's a great honor for me as the CITRIS director to introduce this program today. We're going to bypass the fact that Dan Cameron is not here and go directly to Kourosh Hashimi, who, as you know, is one of the most active members of BERC, and I'd like you to give him a warm welcome of applause as he joins me here on the podium.
Thank you, Paul. My name is Kourosh Hashimi, and I'm one of the BERC co-presidents. For those that aren't familiar with BERC, I've got a few fun slides to just illustrate what we do here. So, we volunteer, we educate, we visit, we teach, we network, we innovate, and we collaborate. So we're actually 3,000 members strong at BERC. And if you aren't on our mailing list already, you should go to our website and join. So the goal of Resources Roundtable is to create a meaningful dialogue about natural resources issues. 97% of the Earth's water is salt water, yet most of the water that we use is from freshwater sources. With increasing water supply issues, do we turn to desalination? Today you're going to hear from a number of experts, some pro and some contra desalination. And so we hope you have a great day today, and we say thank you to all the speakers that have come today to talk to us. With that, I'm going to introduce Tam Doduc. Tam is the board member for the California State Water Resources Control Board under Governor Schwarzenegger. Oops. Tam has also worked on the California Air Resources Board as well as the California EPA, and she is a California Berkeley graduate, having attended both our engineering and business schools here. So thank you, and with that, hello, Tam.
Well, that's being set up. Let me just say it's always the thrill to be back in Berkeley, or Cal, as we love to call it. As I was driving up the hill, I was reminded of my very first day, and I won't give you the year, when I started at Cal as an undergrad. It was my first time away from home. My parents insisted that I stay at the all-girls dorm up there on Hearst there. I didn't tell them, of course, that the all-boys dorm was right next door. What they, didn't know didn't hurt me. But anyway, our very first day, my very first night, we decided to go down to downtown Berkeley to catch a movie. And for whatever reason, we were just absolutely agog over the movie Dune, and I'm now dating myself. But between all of us, and these are people that I've met for the very first time, we had a small Toyota Corolla. It was, I think it was like a 1980 or something, but anyway, it was a hatchback. And Corolla hatchbacks are wonderful things when you're trying to cram in 12 people. And so somehow, one way or another, we were able to cram into the small Toyota Corolla, zoom down the hill with me hanging on to the car with my dear life, thinking I can't die my very first day at college. We ran down, we got in, we saw the movie Dune, where, for those of you who are familiar with the science fiction story, it was all about a desert land and the preciousness of water. And I thought how cool it was. I was a bioengineering major, that if you remember from the movie or the story, they had these body suits that basically conserved 100% of your body sweat and liquids and recycled it for use. Hence, it was my first college introduction, I guess if you will, to the idea of water conservation, water reuse, desalination too for that matter. And little did I know that years later it will become one of my passion in life, and certainly a passion for me at work. So today was a wonderful feeling to be back in Berkeley, to be here, to be able to share the story that I have learned throughout the years in working with water, and the hope that I think we all have for reaching solutions toward what is undoubtedly one of our most challenging problems for the entire human race, not just here in California, but all over the world. So with that grandiose beginning, let me spend a few minutes to sort of lay the foundation, I hope, for the rest of the discussion today by briefly mentioning some of the water challenges and water issues in California. And it will be no surprise to you. Can you hear me okay without using the microphone? Perfect. It's no surprise to any of you that, in California, water controversies, water wars are just prevalent throughout our history, from not just major projects involving the city of LA and the Owens Valley, which this newspaper article from, I believe, 1905 describes, but smaller water fights and water struggles throughout the state. And one of the reasons, not one of the reasons, but one of the characteristics for that challenge is just the tremendous complexity of our water rights system. The State Water Board, of which I'm a member, we are responsible for allocating water rights in California. And we're supposed to balance water use and ensure that water is put to beneficial use throughout the state. And from this statistics, you see that there are almost 37,000 people who have permits or applications to divert water, store it, and use it in some way. And the total number of water that these people are using or attributed to be using is an astounding number, 348 million acre-feet a year of water. And these are just the people that we have on the books. At the State Water Board, one of our challenges is there are so many diversions going out there that we may not know about. Historically, people who have riparian rights to access water, people who have pre-1914 rights to divert water, do not necessarily have to report those findings to us. And also there are, let's be realistic about it, there are illegal diversions happening throughout the state as well. And as a small state agency, it truly is a challenge for us to try to understand, in order to properly allocate water, what the status of the water situation is in California. How much is truly available, and not just paper water, how much is actually being diverted and put to use, and to be frank, how much is being wasted. Those are the critical questions that we're struggling with all the time. And one of the reasons that we struggle so hard is something that you're well familiar with, this idea of that most of our snow melt and rainfall occurs in the north and in the Sierras, and yet our population centers and demands for water are mainly in the south and also in the Central Valley for agriculture as well. And so as a result, we've created a truly complex, and as an engineer, of course, I love it, it's near and dear to my heart, storage and conveyance system to move water from where it naturally occurs to where we need it, where we want to put it to use. And at the core of that complex water system is something called the State Water Project and the Central Valley Water Project, built by the state and the federal government. Huge complex system intended to capture the snow melt, capture the water, and through various pumps, move it through the Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta and distribute that water for use in Southern California most definitely, but also in the Central Valley for agriculture and various other uses. It's a tremendous project that has resulted in tremendous pumping through the Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta. You see here some of the historical exports from the Delta, and the color codes are based on the type of year. Obviously, green and blue are for wetter years, and orange and red are for drier years. And some of the things that you'll notice is in the dry years, when the Delta can least afford the water loss, water pumping sometimes is very high. And there are years of droughts when naturally there just isn't any water to be pumped, and so we see lower pumping from the Delta. But this whole situation of what is pumped from the Delta, how much it is pumped, when it is pumped, are all very controversial and complicated matters that we're struggling with. And not just export pumping, but also other issues are going on in the Delta. Discharge of pollutions, invasive species, all sorts of changes that are going on that has led to what we all have deemed to be a Delta in crisis. And you'll hear some of that later on today from Assembly Member Jared Huffman, I'm sure, who was a key player in trying to solve some of this problem. But the situation that we created based on our need for water and our need to move water from where it naturally occurs to where we need to put it to use, and the fact that we are a changing society and we change the environment as we change, all that has created tremendous concerns, tremendous impacts, tremendous implications for all of us as Californians. Another aspect to consider when you think of water is, of course, as you all know, energy. The amount of energy it takes to move that water from where it is to where we need to use it, the amount of energy it is to treat that water, the amount of energy it is to treat our wastewater as well. So as we think about water and how we use water and how we can more effectively and efficiently use that water, there is tremendous energy implication to that as well. And that energy implication, of course, is also directly linked to our concerns about climate change and global warming and all the impacts that that will create for us. So bottom line is, no surprising, our water use truly is not sustainable. This graphics, I think, estimates about roughly 43 million acre feet per year is used in California. As you know, 1 million acre feet is the amount of water that will cover an acre, 1 foot deep. And I think it's one of the best examples of what an acre feet means is in Heather Cooley's report. If you have a chance to take a look at the Pacific Research Institute's report, I think they released a report last year called The Next Million Acre Feet of Water, and that has some really good example of what does an acre feet of water mean. When I gave a similar speech in Brussels last year, and yes, I converted all of these to metric system. Believe me, that wasn't fun. But I told them about our water use, our percentage per capita water use, and the Europeans were just shocked at the amount of water we use here in California. And so the the coming of all the various factors that we know we have to deal with, our tremendous population growth, the delta being in decline, our water supplies, both surface and groundwaters, potentially being impacted by pollution, the crisis of energy, the crisis of having enough, water to sustain both our needs as well as the ecosystem that we are charged with protecting, especially the State Water Board, has created, I would like to say, opportunities for collaboration, but in reality, it's also created a lot of clashes amongst a lot of interest groups, a lot of very powerful groups, with respect to various, water and the whole idea of ownership of water, which is ironic because under California law, no one owns the water. You may receive a right to put that water to beneficial use, but you do not own that water. But I'm not an attorney, so don't quote me on that. But given all these challenges with respect to water, managing water, and looking for ways to do a better job of using and managing our water, the legislature and the governor got together last year in, Jerry Huffman, what a wonderful timing, to put together a water package. And the water package is comprehensive, it's historic. I won't go into the detail right now, but of special interest to me as a member of the State Water Board, and what I want to share with you today is a part of the package, one of the 4 bills called the Joaquin Delta Reform Act of 2009. And it does a variety of things. It created the Delta Stewardship Council, which is now charged with putting together a plan to meet what was called the co-equal goals of both protecting and preserving the delta, and also ensuring a reliable water supply. A tremendous challenge. The Reform Act also did a variety of things. It required reporting of diversions from by folks who have not done it before. It requires the State Water Board to develop systems to collect that diversion information. It also provides us with some additional enforcement abilities, not as much as I would have liked, but it provided us with some additional, I should say, enforcement capability when it comes to water right, to impose fine and penalties for people who do not report diversions to us. And it also did something very interesting. It asked the State Water Board to do something that you would think is pretty basic. Answer the question, how much water is needed to protect fishery resources? Believe it or not, it's a question that, for a variety of reasons, scientific challenges, as well as political constraints, as well as lack of resources, you name it, it was a question that we at least had not answered before. We've made several attempts throughout the years, and I won't go through the many failed attempts, but what the legislature and the governor did was essentially gave us about 9 months to look at all the scientific information that is available and answer this question, focusing on the baseline, if you will. If you're going to establish these 2 co-equal goals, and there is no doubt how much, we have a lot of information on how much water is being exported, how much water is being consumed in the delta, how much water is being used. The next question would be, well, how much water do the fish need? It's a simple enough question that is tremendously difficult to answer. But the State Board was charged with doing so, and we put together a series of workshops. We compiled lots of information. We told our staff to roll up their sleeves and cancel vacations and holidays. And we did meet the statutory obligation, and in August of this year, we adopted our flow criteria report and said that based on the best scientific information that we have, based on the constraints of only looking at fishery conditions and protecting fisheries, here's what we think. First is delta outflow. Our report, our findings suggest that in order to protect fishery resources, delta outflow should be 75% of what would be there unimpaired, meaning natural flow without diversions, without in-delta use, without various consumption. And this 75% of unimpaired delta flow in the spring is especially, actually let me backtrack. The methodology that we went about in developing these flow criteria was our staff took a look at the aquatic species that we want to protect, looking at for representative aquatic species as well as most sensitive, most vulnerable one. And we selected 8, ranging from the Chinook salmon to the Delta smelt, which I'm sure you've all heard about. So we identified the species to be protected, established some goals in terms of their protection and in terms of increasing their abundance that we want to achieve, and then look at, well, how much flows in the system would help us, we believe, achieve that goal. And based on all those various conditions and factors, one of our flow criteria was 75% of unimpaired delta outflow. Just to put this in context, over the 22 years that we have of historical actual flows, delta outflow is usually around 30% in dry years, and in wet years, when water is not needed to be pumped, it could go up as high as 100%. But in dry years, where the flows are critical, it's typically around 30%. We also look at Sacramento River inflow. The San Joaquin Delta, it has inflow from both the Sacramento River and the San Joaquin River. And our flow criteria is that 75% of Sacramento River inflow from November to June is needed. And historically, the inflow from November to June from the Sacramento River is typically about 50% of unimpaired. We will look at San Joaquin River inflow, and our finding there is 60% of unimpaired inflow in the springtime is necessary. And historically, in the springtime, in dry year, San Joaquin is about 20%, and in wetter years, it's about 50%. So let's just say people didn't like these numbers. And so the next 3 slides are there because my attorney insisted that I have them there. These are caveats. So I'm always careful when I give those flow criteria to say, yes, 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 calm down. This flow criteria are based on technical assessment of the best available science, and we only considered fishery protection. We did not consider upstream needs. We did not consider public interest needs, other environmental needs, other competing demands. In other words, we did not do the balancing of demands that is required of the State Water Board. But what we did was respond to the charge by the legislature and the governor that we answered the basic question of what flows are necessary to protect fishery resources. Oh, and yes, that it has no regulatory or legislative effect because it is an informational report to inform those who are working on delta issues in terms of the flows that fisheries are needed. So now my attorney is happy and I can move on. Bottom line, though, is, and I pulled this quote from the report itself, that the report finds the best available science suggests that current flows are insufficient to protect public trust resources. I don't know why people are shocked about this, but a lot of people seem to be. I think it's not surprising to me simply because based on what we know in terms of how we use water, how much we use water, and how we need to change and manage better our water resources and more effectively and efficiently use these precious resources, I think this finding does not surprise me simply because it reiterates something I think inherently, logically, we all know, and that is it is a zero-sum game. All water was created, and there it is, and it recycles in one way or another. But it's not something that we can expend without consequences. It's something we have to use wisely. It's something that we do need to balance. We need to make informed judgment in using. But with respect to flows and with respect to how water is used in California historically and currently, I don't think anyone should argue that there's plenty of room for improvements, plenty of opportunity for us to do a better job at it. So how do we do that? How do we get there? And I'll take some easy ones first and work my way to the hard ones. Conservation, especially on this slide, I focus on urban and industrial conservation. I think there's widespread support for the idea and a lot of commitment from urban water agencies for water conservation. The legislature, in its historic package last year, did pass law requiring conservation. This 20 by 2020 goal is something that I think a lot of agencies are working towards. Some have claimed they've already met, but this is something that is widely accepted, the idea of conservation. Of course, one could always ask, shouldn't we do more than 20%? And that's an area where I'm sure we'll be able to explore later on today. Another area where there is some level of comfort and acceptance is the use of recycled water. And by the way, I should mention that the goals that I'm going through right now are actually part of a policy that the State Water Board adopted last year. So we actually put these specific quantitative goals as part of our policy and are looking at our various programs to help achieve these goals. So this is a goal for increasing use of recycled water. As of 2002, there was, I believe, about 500,000 acre-feet of water recycled each year, and over 60% of that was used for irrigation, 46% in ag irrigation, and the other in landscape irrigation. But recycled water use is something that, that we certainly can. Actually, let me backtrack and add in something. Conservation, hopefully some of you have had a chance to take a look at the 2009 California Water Plan that was recently completed by the California Department of Water Resources. I don't usually give them plugs, but Kamiya did a great job, I thought, on the California Water Plan. And for the conservation aspect, the California Water Plan, or the Department of Water Resources, estimate that up to 3 million acre-feet of additional supplies could be provided through conservation measures. For recycling, I think they estimated up to 2.3 million acre-feet a year might be available through various recycling efforts. Something that they did not mention in their water plan, but I think is something that is very promising, and it's certainly something the State Water Board adopted in our policy, is the idea of stormwater capture and reuse. It's a new area for us. We're still getting the information together, trying to find programs to facilitate this. But this is a goal that we did adopt last year, and it's a goal that I hope we will be accomplishing. Now we get into the thornier issue where there isn't consensus, shall we say, one of which is an area that Governor Schwarzenegger has been championing, the idea of increased storage and conveyance. The State Water Plan, according to DWR, estimates an additional 1 million acre-feet of storage possible through the various proposals for additional reservoirs. Another area that merits consideration and discussion, and yet we have little consensus on, is the area of agricultural water use efficiency. Ag use is about 80% of our developed water supplies here in California. That's roughly 34 million acre-feet a year of water that's used in agricultural purposes. And I'll give Heather another plug. The Pacific Institute actually did a very thorough analysis and published a document on ag water use efficiency as well. The Department of Water Resources in their water plan gave this one an interesting set of estimates for ag water use efficiency. Their estimate of potential available water through this strategy was 0.1 to 1 million acre-feet per year. It's a pretty wide range. And then there's groundwater. You'll forgive me if I get on my box for this one. Groundwater. California is one of only 2 states in the country that does not have any sort of statewide groundwater management program. We are there with Texas, of all states. Groundwater management is one of those, again, very political, very complex issues in California. And one reason why it is so near and dear to me, and I'll share a story with you, is during the previous years when we had tremendous drought, one of the things that the State Water Board tried to do was we did once Since we have authority over water rights, we inserted a mandatory conservation requirements into a water rights permit. And I thought, what a tool. You put mandatory conservation, meaning reduce use in a water rights permit, in a water rights term, in a water rights condition. Shouldn't that help address the diversion problem? But what happened was, well, yeah, they met their diversion reduction, but all they did was increase their groundwater pumping to make up for it. And, you know, groundwater management is not something that is under the review of the State Water Board. It's under the review of various local agencies. I'm not suggesting that it be under the review of the Water Board, but I'm suggesting that we need to better understand our groundwater system, how much is available where, and how to integrate and manage that system in a more cohesive manner. One of the things that is so important, looking at water supply issues, water shortages, and water management is conjunctive use of groundwater and surface water. Looking at groundwater storage, looking at groundwater basin recharge, looking at from a water quality perspective, how do we clean up contaminated groundwater and put them back to good use. The state water plan, in the state water plan, DWR estimates up to 2 million acre-feet a year could be available through groundwater storage and better use of conjunctive use using groundwater and surface water. And then, finally, we get to the topic of today's discussion, desalination. My understanding, and I am sure we'll hear today from folks who are much more knowledgeable in the field than I am, is that as of 2009, there were 26, I believe, desalination plants in California. 20 of them are groundwater desalination, and 6 are seawater desalination. And together they have a capacity of 84,000 acre-feet per year. 84,000 acre-feet per year. Compare that to the 42 million acre-feet a year that we use in California. The Department of Water Resources estimated, based on the number of desalination plans that are under design or being planned, that potentially the capacity for water through desalination could rise from anywhere up to 300 to 400,000 acre-feet per year through this process. And I'll end with laying the groundwork, I guess, for today's discussion by saying that my personal as well as personal opinion is that we have such tremendous water challenges that we need to explore all options. I as a regulator need to understand all options, need to understand the pros and cons, and need to become better aware of the impacts of various water options, water use, not just on the communities, obviously the very important part, the communities that need the water, but also the impacts to the environment, the impacts to society, and forums such as today and the experts that will be here today, I think is so critical for all of us, myself included, to better understand all these issues so that we are better informed and therefore can make informed decisions on all these critical aspects when it comes to water management. With desalination, there are obviously pros and cons that you'll hear about today. We have an exciting lineup of speakers on both panels. I think you'll hear a very robust, but also very respectful discussion of all those areas of differences. And perhaps we might even come together and have some areas of agreement as well. But I think it is very exciting that we are talking about these opportunities. We're talking about the pros and cons, the challenges, and the opportunities to come together and try to solve some of these water problems. California is known for our water wars. Do a Google on California water wars and you'll be overwhelmed with the number of entries you get. But we're also known as a state where anything can and could happen, some for better, some for worse. But I truly believe in the innovation, not just in the state, but especially our university system, especially at Cal. Given the level of interest and commitment and excitement that I know is surrounding this issue, is surrounding both the area of addressing water and energy, challenges that we as society have. I'm very hopeful that we will work together and find those solutions. But to begin, we need to have a dialogue. And forums such as this are absolutely critical. I congratulate Crash and the organizers for bringing us together. I thank you for your time, and I'm not sure what the game plan is, but I will turn it over. And I think, at least for my panel members, they're all here, so we'll begin as soon as you feel ready. Let me hand it over.